I was working in Vancouver, and they said, "Oh, we've got an Italian director who'd love to talk to you about a part in his film." And I said, "Oh, great! I'd love to work with Italian directors. They tend to work in Italian, so maybe I'll be playing an English part in an Italian film. Great, whatever." And they said, "It's Matteo Garrone," and I went, "Yes, whatever it is," because I'd seen Gomorrah and I'd seen Reality, and those were two, extraordinary contemporary films. So then I had a Skype call with him, and he said, "I'm going to send you this script. There's a part of you to play in this film." And I thought, well, it's going to be some sort of contemporary Neapolitan tale of corruption or whatever. I didn't expect it to be a medieval fairy tale. And then you read it and you realise that there's many links with Gomorrah and Reality in a way, because there's a preoccupation with how people fail, how people are victims of their own desires, victims of their own misplaced loyalties, and in a way it seems similar than I first thought. But whatever, I was definitely thrilled to work with him because I just loved those earlier films. But I wasn't aware of the name Basile. Then I realised, or I read, that his collections of tales, which he made, the collections, he's a contemporary Shakespeare, so 16th century collections. The early versions of Cinderella and Rapunzel are in there, and so obviously I'd heard of those, but these three tales were completely new to me, and it was amazing to think that Matteo had selected these three to work on.
Who will my husband be, Father?
Well, he will be braver than the most valiant knight, and wiser even than our own court doctor.
I think they'll absolutely adore the darkness because it's not compromised in any way. The shade in the tales is honoured. There's plenty of light, there's plenty of humour, there's plenty of surrealism, there's plenty of strangeness and creatures and stuff, but there's also this honouring of death and honouring of serious punishment for miscreants and stuff like that. But it sort of jars in tone. We're used to genres that almost, sort of are more systematic than this, and even conventional fantasy and fairy tales. There's a sort of systematization of how things are paid for, and everyone's weighed in the balance, and everyone gets what they deserve. Here, it's a little more. It seems a little more chaotic than that, and I think that's probably what appealed to Matteo, and it's certainly what appealed to me reading.
What can I do? You heard the proclamation. I can't go back on my word. Violet!
Yeah, the script had it this intercutting between different kingdoms and different kings. So at that stage, I thought, maybe we'll all be working, in the same area. And then he explained the ambition of the project, which is to shoot it all over Italy, to shoot them effectively separately, apart from this couple of scenes where we see that all the characters together, or most of the characters together, and that seemed, strikingly ambitious for a European film. It's the scale of it. Yeah, so I didn't get to see them until the other actors until there's a funeral scene. I remember seeing Vincent there, and he'd just finished his whole section, and he looked over and I looked at him and went, "How's it been going?" And he went, "It's great." And I thought, wow, it's going to be an adventure, because Matteo's that kind of guy, in the sense that certainly in the earlier films he was in charge of the camera as well as directing it, and here it was a new kind of relationship because he was working with Peter as cinematographer, and I think that relationship was different from Matteo, and I think it sort of creates a different kind of film than the earlier films. It was there written up. I mean, I think Matteo was keen for me, like most directors would be keen for the actors to be comfortable saying these words, and if I wanted to change some, I could change them. But it was broadly speaking there that the structure was there. Obviously, the physical business, with the flea and kind of trying to find a way to negotiate with these puppets that was convincing. That we worked at that. What I loved about the part was this range of emotion in quite a compact story. You know, this seesawing of emotion that the character undergoes was so extreme. It's a great challenge to try and play this child king who is kind of lethal, potentially lethal, because a king who is so infantile. It's a kind of stock character in fairy tales. Someone, a king who is kind of crazily at the mercy of his own whims. So there's that tone, but then there's also this terrible repentance and terrible journey that he has to go through. This pathetic transformation.
No. No. Next.
Yeah, there's definitely the this scene with the flea, which obviously was invisible at the time when we shot it, where I develop a relationship with a flea. This felt, I suddenly thought, I've done this before. I don't know where. I've done something like this before, and I realised it was at drama school in Paris, where there's a very classic piece of business in the Commedia dell'arte where Harlequino battles with a sword with a fly. So the battle develops in such a way that he ends up doing backflips and flick-flacks and stuff. So, not that I did any flick-flacks. That kind of dynamic of trying to establish something invisible and then developing a relationship with it, that was familiar from drama school, and in a way, I suppose it's close. That French tradition grew out of Italian theatre as much as French theatre. As much as one has control over the parts one's offered, I think that I'm always trying to look for space in a part where you can explore a range of emotions to see how much emotional space is in a character, so that a character has isn't just funny or isn't just tragic or isn't just pathetic. That you get to see some other side to the character. I mean, like most actors, you're always looking for space to operate in. So in that sense, he's like most parts that you're working on. You're trying, but here, because it's a condensed, essentialized tale, and you have about however many scenes, 20 scenes to tell the story. You have to do that change in a much more, I suppose, stylized way.
Whatever I do is done well. No one has the right to question my will.
Well, it was great. He's very hands-on as a director, very... he's a very physical, forceful guy who's getting the thing done, and he's very, effusive, and then he'll give you. There's often when you're working with someone where English isn't the first language, there's a direction in it, and you go, oh, what does he mean by that? And you go, oh, maybe he means that, and he goes, no, I mean the opposite of that, and there's those negotiations to do, and I suppose as well some of the humour in the piece, the there's a negotiation to be found between trying to get inside the head of how broad he wants it, how or whether he wants it more subtle. I suppose there is that to be found, to be negotiated. And obviously there's a range of both parts in the film. But I think he was very happy that I wanted to go as far in either direction as possible to try and pull the character from being an idiot kind of comic character into being like a father who's lamenting the development of his daughter, the loss of his daughter because she's growing up. Films this ambitious and this magical and this visually stupefying are very, very unusual. That is, particularly European films. They spring from a culture which gave us Fellini and Bertolucci and Visconti, and here you have an Italian director working at the height of his powers, making a film that belongs to that tradition on a scale that we rarely see in European cinema, and I think that in itself is a kind of compelling reason to see the film. The combination of the comic, the macabre, the fantastical, and the strange in this, it honours the tradition of the European folk tale and fairy tale, and it's rare to see all of those beats honoured in a way here, and it can confuse you and you can be befuddled by it, but you will be arrested by it because it's very. I found it very, very moving. These tales, the tale of two old women who become besotted with an idea of themselves that is impossible. This is dreadful and tragic and pathetic, and I think that range of emotion is in the film. And then, very, very more on a more kind of prosaic level, it's rare to see Italy filmed so beautifully as you see it here by Peter Susitsky, who's just filmed these parts of Italy that you won't have seen before, and you will think are CGI, but are actually natural landscapes beautifully lit.